Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Sunday evening to you all. I hope you guys are doing well out there tonight and certainly have had yourselves a fantastic Sunday and a great weekend as it comes to an end. I got you a big update on what's going on with Major Hurricane Lee. When we did the video this morning, this had downgraded to a Category 2 hurricane. This is re-upgraded to a Category 3 hurricane. So it's that major status, and we talked about it in this morning's video that this was likely to strengthen, and it has done so. So what we'll do in this video is we'll go over all the latest and greatest information on Lee. We'll talk about how he's doing right now, the latest data from the hurricane hunters that just got done flying through this storm. We'll give you the update from the National Hurricane Center. We'll compare the Euro and the GFS to see how different or similar they are. We'll talk about some hurricane model guidance, and then we'll talk about steering currents. And of course, if you've been tuning in for a while as we've been discussing Lee, we spent a lot of time on that segment of the video because I think it's important for you folks as the audience to, kind of understand what's going on with how these systems are steered. You got high pressure, you got low pressure, and there's a flow around both of these features that are different. So we'll discuss that, and we'll discuss what could potentially steer Lee one way or the other. So we'll also talk about a new area of interest that could potentially work its way across the tropical Atlantic. So the second half of the video will be discussing that, and also a cool down coming for the central and eastern U.S. We'll talk about all this information in this video, jammed packed full of new information. If you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below so I can pray over it and so others can do so too. Let's get rolling. So you got Lee right here on your screen. Lee is definitely improving. You see the intense areas of pink and white here. This indicates cold cloud tops, which we know the higher up you get in the atmosphere, the colder it is. So we know that we have some strong, tall updrafts centered around this low-level circulation, which, by the way, is starting to clear out a little bit more. You see right in here, now you can actually see even someone who, doesn't know a lot about the weather or doesn't have a really big interest in weather. I mean, you can tell where the center of this storm is right into here now. So this thing is wrapping very well. It has a better symmetrical look to it. It's not being affected by shear as much, and it's looking a lot more healthy this evening with robust convection surrounding the entire low-level circulation of Lee with what looks like a clearing out eye. In fact, you can see it a lot better on Water Vapor Loop. This morning, Lee did a what you call, overnight last night, Lee did what you call an eye wall replacement cycle, which means basically the old eye wall turns into the outer eye wall, and then basically a new inner eye wall forms, and sometimes you can have a double kind of eye wall, if you will, and this actually causes these systems to weaken because basically that thing that's really protecting the heart and soul of these tropical systems, that eye wall, basically weakens. And eventually, when that cycle is done, these systems will begin to strengthen again. But while it's being done, the systems weaken. That's exactly what happened with Idalia. Idalia did an eye wall replacement cycle right before it made landfall in the Big Bend area of Florida last week or a week and a half ago. And that's why it weakened before landfall. It's kind of what Lee just did also overnight. So it's always interesting. But you look at Water Vapor Loop, guys, and you see it looks like a big white blob, right? But then if you look right here in the middle, you see how you see a little clearing starting to show up. This really indicates Lee is not rapidly intensifying, but Lee is definitely strengthening this evening. And I'll be interested to see what Lee looks like as we're waking up tomorrow morning. Could it be pushing Category 4 status? It is forecast to reach Category 4 status again. Does it hit Category 5 status? I don't think so. But as far as the weakness and strength of Lee, it has been everywhere so far. It's been tough to forecast, and he's definitely threw some curveballs. So that eye is beginning to clear out. You're starting to see some dryness right where the low-level circulation is. And Lee might have just a cleared out eye sometime later tonight. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if you guys remember when I showed you that picture from the hurricane hunters, which, by the way, this is the data the hurricane hunters got, which indicates that 954 millibar low pressure now. But if you remember that picture I showed you where the hurricane hunters went out at night and actually saw a cleared out eye of Category 5 Lee a few days ago. You could see the stars in the eye. It was wild. I showed it in a video a few days ago, but it was crazy. Does Lee get that defined eye again? It's possible, but this was the latest pass about an hour or so ago. Let's see if there's any new information. There's not. I think that was the last pass it did. Found that 954 central minimum pressure right here. So this does indicate that, yes, Lee has strengthened back into a Category 3 hurricane. 120 mile per hour hurricane now. So it looks like the weakening as of now of Lee has stopped. And we expect this to continue to strengthen over the next day or so. But 954 millibar low out here, 120 mile per hour storm, and moving west-northwest at 8 miles per hour. It's slowly beginning to slow down. Remember, we always kind of thought that Lee was going to get very slow right here in the western Atlantic, well north of Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and areas like that. We got Margot out here, and we'll talk about these two X's a little bit later in the video. But this is the latest cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center. You notice the M's stays on your screen all the way through midweek this week. So all the way through Wednesday afternoon, this is at least supposed to maintain Category 3 or higher status. But what I want you to notice, and I haven't talked about this a lot just because the winds aren't actually impacting anybody, any kind of landmass or anything like that. But what we should really watch over the next couple of days is watch how this area in orange really expands. This is where tropical storm force winds potentially could be in this area. And then right here in the orange, that is where hurricane force winds are. Right here, if you see the current wind field estimate down here, tropical storm in this color, hurricane in this brownish color right here. So what I want to watch for is, does the wind field of Lee really begin to expand? And we expect it to. And then eventually, Lee will lose its tropical characteristics and really merge with a jet or a cold front or a trough, if you will. You can definitely say it in multiple different ways and really will expand and get very large. And I'll show you a scenario of that here in a second. But supposed to weaken as we get into late this work week. And then now Bermuda is in that cone. But most model guidance show that this is going to miss Bermuda. Now, I could see Bermuda getting some outer bands. Another way of looking at this is zoom Earth. The sun is setting on the North Atlantic now, so that's why it looks darker over here and lighter over here. But here is Lee, okay? Lee potentially makes it to Category 4 status tonight. In fact, it's forecast to at 2 a.m. tonight. Lee is supposed to hit 130 mile per hour Category 4 storm. And then Lee could make it as high as a 140 mile per hour Category 4 storm sometime tomorrow. So this is a decent amount of strengthening inside 24 hours, right? And then it's expected to begin to weaken potentially sometime into Tuesday afternoon, and then it really begins to lose some steam as we get midway this week. And then by the time we get into 2 p.m. Thursday, maybe this is as low as a Category 2 hurricane. But what I can tell you is they have bumped up the intensity forecast from this morning. I don't know if you folks remember who tuned in this morning. This was down to 130 miles per hour. This is back up to 140 miles per hour. So does it try to sneak and get up to Category 5 status? It's going to have to get to a 160 mile per hour storm to do that, because the National Hurricane Center only goes up in 5 mile per hour increments. So that bump up from 155 to 160 will make it a high in Category 4, then Category 5. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So that is what's going on from the latest from the National Hurricane Center with Lee. Let's talk about some model guidance. Let's go over the Euro and the GFS. And I can tell you, as of now, I'll tell you right off the dot, both models are pretty right beside each other. They're in pretty decent agreement. So let's check them out. This is initializing this evening. We'll keep this going. And, you know, the forecast, nothing's ever set in stone with weather. Nothing's ever set in stone with really anything in the future in life outside of weather. But the forecast and the guidance really points to this making that abrupt turn north. So we get into Monday morning, tomorrow morning, September 11th. We get into September the 12th, Tuesday morning, and it indicates that number dropping right here. This is indicating a stronger system The Euro wants to drop this all the way to Category 5 status, but the Euro has been going back and forth. And we're not really looking at this model guidance to really show you the strength. It's really the path that I want to show you guys. So you keep this going here, and this almost wants to move due west a little bit here in the coming days. I can already tell you it's probably going to freak people out in the southeast, like Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia. You're going to think, well, why is this thing moving right towards us? Well, it's forecast to do so, and I'll talk about why here in a second, as we have been talking about why over the last several videos. But this actually might inch itself due west, east to west. Okay, but then I want you to watch how this begins to make that turn north. Abrupt turn north midway this week. We're getting into Thursday morning, and we'll stop it right here. And this thing is beginning to lose some steam. It's probably getting wider because it's starting to move north and probably feel the impact of a jet that's digging down, or has been digging down over the eastern U.S., and it probably begins to lose. Maybe not at this point Thursday morning, but it will begin to lose some tropical characteristics once it gets well north of Bermuda. But we'll stop it here. We'll go on and flip it to a different vantage point. And here is Lee down here on your screen, and obviously the eastern U.S. We'll keep this moving north. This misses Bermuda Friday morning, but it's close enough to bring some impacts, maybe some gusty outer bands that could produce tropical storm force conditions. The Euro does get it pretty close. A pretty powerful hurricane just west of Bermuda. A little bit too close for comfort. And we keep this going, and the Euro does not make that jog north-northwest like we've seen a couple runs. This, it does make a little jog right there. You see here where it wants to act like it wants to kind of almost move just due north. But in general, it moves kind of north-northeast to eventually north later this week as we're getting into Saturday. And this looks like it's heading right towards the western end of Nova Scotia as we make our way into next weekend. Now, is it going to be Friday? Is it going to be Saturday or Sunday? I think that's still up in the air. I would aim more towards Saturday and Sunday. But here it is at the bottom of your screen for you folks in Maine and Nova Scotia. This misses Maine, but I really think that this is going to be broad enough because it begins that phasing of becoming kind of post-tropical, losing those tropical characteristics. And when that happens, a lot of times the wind field expands, but the winds just aren't intense. So the wind field gets wider, but the winds drop. But the rain shield, as far as precipitation, when this happens, they lose the tropical characteristics, really broadens. So I could definitely see, if this track was to hold, for example, Maine still getting impacts from this. Heck, even eastern Mass and areas of Rhode Island, well, you would definitely have to watch. Nothing is set in stone a week out, guys. But this does eventually make landfall Sunday evening, kind of in the central Nova Scotia area, and this moves due north-northeast. It never really fully makes that turn northeast. It's actually moving a little bit further north than east, and just gets right up in here in southeast Canada, and to deliver some rain towards Newfoundland. But this doesn't continue moving towards Newfoundland. I mean, this just gets way north. It just goes pretty much northeast. Where a lot of these runs were actually turning this more so northeast once it did hit Nova Scotia, and then eventually hitting Newfoundland. All right, so it's kind of weird. We're still trying to figure this out. We will continue to try to figure this out. But I'm telling you, for you folks in the southeast, I wouldn't worry about Lee. I haven't been on TikTok lately. TikTok is the crazy app when it comes to weather. So I'm not sure what anybody's saying about Lee anymore. But hopefully they're not saying it's going to ram into the U.S., the southeast coastline. I really think. Now, I do think if you're in New England, you definitely need to continue to watch out. You definitely need to keep your eyes on this thing. But if you live from like Virginia point south, I really have some high confidence this isn't going to affect y'all. So we'll take a look at the GFS. And this will continue to move that kind of north-northwest. And then the GFS will probably try to jog due west at some point. In fact, if the GFS does it, it's probably only like a quarter of a day period. Honestly, the GFS keeps a north-northwest pace here basically the entire week. And then eventually it takes an abrupt turn north Wednesday morning, September the 13th, and starts to move north, and then we'll go on and switch it to the eastern U.S. vantage point. Here's Bermuda. Lee's getting close, not as close as the European. Okay, the European is a good little bit closer. It has the center of the circulation right in here. This brings more impacts into Bermuda. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Bermuda ends up getting like tropical storm watches or warnings. Wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, you're going to have a pretty powerful hurricane still just west of you guys, and I wouldn't be surprised. So the GFS is more west, and the new GFS is coming out. It's literally starting to initialize right now. So we got the 18Z GFS that's going to drop in about an hour, but I had to go on and get this video out because I got to pick up my girls from kids choir here in about an hour. So had to just go on and do the video now, but we'll keep this going. We're getting into Friday morning. And I mean, we have a pretty strong storm, but it's starting to merge with probably some sort of trough into here. Okay, that's why it looks weird. You kind of still got the hurricane, but you got this weird kind of extended area of rain right in here. So I think this is not going to look much like a hurricane anymore. It's going to look like just a massive, large storm once we get into late this work week. But this continues to go, and it looks like it's about to start heading northeast. Not going to bother anybody at this point, right? It's making this jog northeast, and then all of a sudden it wants to move north again as we're getting into our Friday afternoon, evening, and honestly almost jogs a tick west. So this thing's suddenly looking like it's heading right towards Maine. And here it comes, and it's starting to actually slow down, probably because ridging builds on top of it. And yeah, this eventually feels enough weakness where, you know, this doesn't look like, it looks like it's about to plow right into Maine, right? But then it notches, it kind of nudges more northeast, and then eventually makes a landfall and kind of grinds up the coast of, the southern coast of Nova Scotia, the kind of the southwest coast of Nova Scotia. Makes landfall, and then we go on and switch it up here, makes that landfall there, and then eventually gets to where the Euro is. It just kind of takes a different route. The Euro kind of has it in the same location too. But the GFS makes a landfall more so into Sunday. The Euro, I believe, made that landfall more so, well, no, Sunday also. I thought so. The timing has come together. I'm kind of finding some of this information out on the fly. You think, well, daggone, man, do you go over the information before you start a video? I'll be honest, sometimes I don't. I'll just wing it, and I just start talking, and we'll figure it out as we go. But we'll take a look at the HF. I think this is the HF-A model. Yep, HF-A model. This is a hurricane model. And it's initializing as a 944 hurricane, so initializing a little bit too strong, but don't really look at the strength of this model. What I want you to watch is this makes that turn north, and this only goes out 126 hours. Okay, makes that turn north right here, right? We're getting a Thursday morning, same position as the Euro and the GFS, all right? We get into Friday morning. Here comes that trough. You can actually see it well. You see how these wind barbs are moving in right here. They're kind of coming out this direction right into here, kind of coming out the northeast. This is continuing to move, and if you notice, the wind barbs are coming out of a different direction here. They're coming out, if you look way up here, they're coming out the southwest. Okay, so that is the trough that's digging in, and you got a flow that's coming like this. And I'm going to draw on this map here in a second. But as this moves in, it misses the trough, and you can actually see how it does when basically these wind barbs are coming out like the north. Okay, so that means there's winds coming out the north, and then here we go. This is moving in, and what I want you to watch here is this is moving north, and the last little frame here as we're getting into Friday, this goes from moving north to nudging almost north-northwest. Okay, so we got to see what happens after this. This is the latest run. It's definitely not looking like it's just gonna do that and just head on out to sea. It looks like that it's gonna kind of maybe take this path or so. So we got to watch for that on the latest runs of the hurricane models here. So we'll get this off your screen, and we're going to talk about this trough and this ridge up here and the flows. And I was just kind of talking about the flows just now, but you gotta, one thing that I'll note here is this is winds more so in the low levels of the atmosphere. So, these wind barbs I was just talking about, not going to influence it much, but it does indicate the trough even in the low levels of the atmosphere. But I'm talking way too much on that, probably confusing you guys. I'm going to explain this a lot better here in a second. This is the European ensemble. They're clustered together a lot better. And I ain't gonna lie, you folks tuning in from Nova Scotia, this is, a lot of these runs go right into Nova Scotia, whether it's the eastern areas or the western areas, it goes right into you folks. Now, some of it goes in between Nova Scotia and Maine, some of it plowed into the down east areas of Maine. You got a few stragglers that are wanting it to get very close to New England. But, there's none of these runs that go into New York City, Long Island, and so it really likes Southeast Canada. But, of course, guys, we're still a week to 8 days out from landfall, at least. Okay, so, this could end up verifying over here more to the west, or, we could end up escaping this altogether, even our folks, our neighbors in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So let's talk about the steering currents. And we re-go over this information every time. And I don't mind doing it because every time I do it, I feel like it gives me an opportunity to get better at explaining it. So the area in orange, that's high pressure. The area in blue, that is low pressure. The flow around both of these features are different. So we actually have a little bit of troughing over the eastern U.S. now, but that is in the process of weakening, a little bit of an upper low. So that's weakening. You see this blue area right here? That's Margot. You see this blue area that, has black in the middle? That is Lee. And then you see this kind of extension of what we call the subtropical high or ridge is extending right out in front of Lee. This is pushing Lee and basically making Lee go more west than north right now. Okay? And I'm going to draw on this here in a second. So we keep this going, and this continues to influence Lee. But what I want you to watch here is two things right here as we're getting into tomorrow evening. You see this blue area showing up over the Great Lakes and upper Midwest? That is an upper trough that's digging down with an associated cold front that's going to dig down and amplify at some point next week. And this is ultimately what's going to bring our cooler weather. So at the same time, you got an approaching Lee. All right, what I want you to watch right in here where there's orange, light ridging, watch how this ridging just disappears. Look how it turns to white. That is our weakness. So if you don't know, stronger tropical systems will always want to gain what we call latitude, which means they always want to fight to move north. Okay? This is because they are influenced by basically the flow aloft and basically winds further up in the atmosphere. Why? It's because a stronger system has stronger updrafts, just in all areas of the storm. A stronger system is basically a higher system. So these higher systems are basically influenced by currents higher up in the atmosphere. Whether the winds are moving one way or the other, that's what we got to figure out. So in this case, you got to flow around this high pressure, in the upper levels of the atmosphere that's going to tug on this. But there's a weakness that opens up here with a trough digging down and a ridge kind of backtracking back north. Okay? So we stop it here, and then, well, I technically already had it stopped, but we keep it going, and it finds this weakness. At the same time, you got this trough digging down with an associated cold front. Okay, most upper troughs like this have a cold front with it. And typically cold fronts save the day with these strong tropical systems out here. And especially in El Nino years. In El Nino years, we can have some big hurricanes like we have had this year. But a lot of times they are fish storms, which means they curve out to sea and don't bother a soul but the fish. So it feels this weakness, and you think it's about to get picked up by this trough. But And it kind of influences this to the point where it actually helps this system lose somewhat of its tropical characteristics. But it really misses this, one being because, well, it just misses it. That Lee's basically going a little bit too slow, and this troughing is weakening. This trough is weakening. So if this trough was still stout over the eastern U.S., then you would think, okay, this cold front is going to kick this on out of here. But the trough is weakening, and it almost just well, it does. It becomes non-existent as we get into late this work week. At the same time, you got this moving ridge. And what we know about a ridge is the flow goes around this ridge like this. Okay? And then just like that. And then just like that. So around low pressure, the flow goes like this. Okay, and I'm just using this little blue blob as an example. And it's the same thing with the tropical system, guys. It's low pressure, so in the northern hemisphere, it goes like this. And that's exactly how Lee is spinning. So I hope that makes sense. So it would, feel the tug of this trough if this huge trough was still over this area and Lee was already kind of a little bit further north in the Atlantic. But it's not. So let's get this back off and let's get to some motion. I'll show you what I mean. All right, stop it right here. What if Lee was right here? Okay, and this trough was digging down like this. This would most certainly probably kick Lee out and basically just not only kick Lee out, but weaken this ridge, and Lee would probably take more of a northeast turn out. Okay, because, you look at the steering right like this, it's going like this. So this is going to kick Lee on out of here if Lee was like right here. This would send it northeast and up against this high. Now, depending on what this high would be, it would probably make it a little bit harder. But of course, we're all just speaking what ifs at this point. We're getting some pretty big confidence that this trough is not going to influence Lee that much, except maybe in aiding in it losing those tropical characteristics. But as Lee's coming up, you would think that this would head on out to sea, but because you have this high pressure up here, this makes it very hard for Lee to just head on out to sea. And in fact, where you have this weakness kind of here between two high pressures, one over Canada and one right here, this tries to sniff out that weakness, okay? And I think regardless is going to move right into Nova Scotia. And it's probably going to try to move like this. Okay, and it pretty much does. It pretty much does. But what I want you to notice here is there's a light little nudge back. Like, watch this. See how it's moving northeast. But you see that? See that little bump right there? It's very hard to see. I know it's very subtle, but there's almost a little bump back west. And that is because this little gap right here, you see the darker oranges that begin to show up right here in southeast Canada. They begin to darken up. Look, see how you got it? They connect right here. So basically, this kind of bumps it a little bit further west. And this is just the euro. I'm just using the euro as an example. And therefore, Lee ends up kind of, it looks like it's about to plow right into western Nova Scotia. But there's two things that, and I know I'm just spitting all a bunch of information. You're like, wow, what are you talking about, dude? But this is the high pressure strengthening? Is it repositioning itself? And one thing I want you to notice is, yes, the high pressure is strengthening here, but look how it's kind of moving north. This is allowing Lee to kind of move further northeast because the high pressure strengthened, but it's kind of moving a little bit out of the way. Okay, but at the end of the day, this high pressure right here, all right, that's got to flow like this, all right, is preventing this to just kind of just moving out like this because there is no weakness right here. There's a high, okay? So I hope that makes sense. I know you're probably asking, well, if there's a flow like this, why doesn't this just get basically pushed right into Maine? Well, it kind of goes back to what I said before. Tropical systems, stronger tropical systems do not get bullied as much. All right, and even though they want to head north, I mean, if they, you get momentum with tropical systems, just like with anything, not just with the weather, and just like a storm system, a stronger storm system. I mean, when it's already got a move on like this, I mean, it's going to take more than just a strengthening, kind of moving away high pressure to abruptly turn this northwest into Maine. So it's basically a stronger system is going to try to fight with everything it's got to move up against that high pressure and move further north. Now, if this was like a weak, puny little tropical storm, then it probably would be pushed a lot further west but this is a stronger system, and it's wanting to fight to move further north against this ridging. It does influence it, but just not as much. So, you know, at the end of the day, guys, and I know I've spent a lot of time on this, if you stop it right here, if you just basically took this trough of low pressure here and you basically put a massive high pressure right into here, okay, and it was a strong one, I mean, this would probably push Lee more so like this, okay, or maybe even like that, but you don't have that. You have, you know, this low pressure that we're trying to figure out, this trough of low pressure, and you got this high pressure. And I mean, this entire area right here is what we're all trying to figure out, okay? This entire region with the trough over here, high pressure over here. At the end of the day, we got to figure that out. So, sorry I spent a ton of time on that. I hope it makes sense. I'm always learning. I'll be honest, you know, I learned about that kind of stuff as early as 2 to 3 years ago. I've known it a little bit, but as far as detailed, when I figured out how that kind of stuff worked, it changed the game as far as knowledge. It opened up so many other things, but I hope that helped with Lee. Now let's talk about this area of interest behind Lee and basically could develop south of Margot. There's a tropical wave coming off North Africa. For some reason, I like to call Africa South America sometimes, so watch out, I might do that. This is coming off the coast of North Africa, technically the western coastline of Africa, and it has a 40% chance now, code orange, what we call it in the weather world, a 40% chance to develop into this region within the next 7 days. Okay, we're going to ignore this other little yellow area because we're not expecting this to develop. But this is the actual origin of the tropical system right now. Well, this is basically where it is, and it's saying that this is going to potentially develop into this region in the next 7 days. So this is definitely something we need to watch. The next name is Nigel. That's the end name after Margot. So this is that tropical wave. It's not much. It's just a disorganized areas of showers and storms and cloudiness. That's Margot right here spinning away, not really bothering anybody. And this is our wave. Okay? And, you know, when they're this disorganized, sometimes a main vortice will form in a totally different area than what we initially thought. For example, this is kind of where they're saying the area is right into here, but this piece of energy coming off that's right behind it could end up being the dominant piece of energy. It's just something we got to watch for. So let's see what the models are saying for this potential area of interest. All right, so we move this in time. We get into early next week. Well, this week. I keep forgetting it is this week. We're getting to Wednesday afternoon. You just got a big blob of yellow down here. A huge, broad area of rotation pretty much going on. Eventually, a dominant vortice forms, and at this point, we got a tropical cyclone trying to develop around this Friday, and then we get into Saturday, and then we get into Sunday, and the GFS is saying we got Nigel on our hands by the time we get into this time next weekend. Now, you know, for example, we'll stop it here. This is 7 days from now. It takes 7 days for this to get right here to right here. So this might end up being another system we have to talk a lot on. Or we'll be talking a lot on for the foreseeable future. But there is a potential that this could not even develop. But we'll watch. We'll take it all the way to about 10 days out. And I will tell you the GFS does develop this into a hurricane and ends up in the same area that Lee is in right now as a strong hurricane. But this is 10 days out. This is getting into September the 20th. So we got a lot to figure out about this one. But we will take a look at the Euro too. Euro does develop something also. You see the huge area in green right there in the kind of the bottom middle of your screen. We get into Thursday. We get into Friday morning. Just looks like a big kind of area of green and yellow. And I would say by next Monday morning, 8 days from now, we got a developing tropical cyclone, probably a tropical depression at this point. But this is looking like it's heading out to sea on the Euro. Okay, but it does eventually form Nigel way up here. Totally different than the icon, where the icon has a system way down here. What does the icon show with this? Same thing. Huge, broad spin down here in the tropical Atlantic. And then it eventually does develop this into a depression. And eventually develops this into Nigel about a week from today. You got Tropical Storm Nigel out here, chugging along. So I think that this does warrant some attention. Is it a threat? We don't even know fully if Lee is a threat. So y'all know we don't even know if Nigel's going to be a threat. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, Nigel's going to be another storm that you're going to see get hyped up like crazy. An insane amount of hype if we continue to get some of these huge runs that we're seeing with this system. And there is some crazy runs. There's one GFS run that plows a hurricane right into New York City. You're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. So just be careful what you believe out there and stick to people that you trust. Okay, we take a look at some European ensemble guidance, and it does have a pretty decent amount of support that we're going to get some kind of development out of this area of interest, as this shows up a lot of members out of those 51 members from the European ensemble. Let's actually take a look at the GFS ensemble also, and we're going to have to do this on the fly. Let's open that up. Weather Nerds is a great site, guys. It is. It's kind of weird to use at first, but once you get the hang of it, man, it is a fantastic free weather site. But you got the signal down here too, but man, it's everywhere. You got members down here, you got members up here, and members in the middle, but there is a signal for something. So let's talk about this cool down. All right, let's just take a break from the tropics, and we've been talking that to death. Let's talk about some good news, and that is the fact that we got a cool down coming, and we are losing that trough that we got over us right now in the southeast. And here's the big dog trough that's going to influence Lee down here that we just talked about. But let's talk about what kind of weather it could bring for us in the central and eastern U.S. And here it comes digging down. What we know about these huge upper troughs is they have a cold front associated with them. So it'll bring drier air, more comfortable air, and cooler temperatures. All right, and here it comes digging down midweek, and then it swings in and swings on out. And then what happens after that, we're not sure. But we know that this big blob of blue that you just saw on your screen is going to bring cooler than average temperatures. And this is the chance to see below average temperatures between the 16th and the 20th coming up. And you have a decent chance of it right here in this blue right here. That is a 50 to 60% chance of below average temperatures. But I'm telling you, this will begin to show up really here in the next 3 to 4 days for a lot of these areas in blue. So the confidence is probably pretty higher in that in the shorter term. But one thing we'll look at here, dew points is the best thing to look at this time of the year when indicating a changing in air mass. So right now you have a pretty moist air mass all the way up into southern New England, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York City. It's very humid for this time of the year. Not totally unusual, but it's pretty humid. So we move this in time and look at this drier air. If you don't know anything about dew points, and if you don't, that is the best way to measure humidity. I would always say stop looking at your humidity percentage. Look at dew points. When you get dew points above, I would say when you get dew points from 60 to 65, you start to feel a little bit of stickiness in the air, a little bit of humidity. You start to get to 65 to 70, you're definitely starting to notice that it's humid outside. Anything above a 70-degree dew point is pretty much a tropical air mass, and it's very humid outside. Okay, so when you get dew points below 60 into the 50s and 40s, that is a crisp air mass. That's like the 40s and 50s are the perfect dew points. When you start to get in the 30s and lower, that's when you start to get chapped lips and stuff like that. It's very, very dry. Typically that indicates something. Typically that's something you see out west or in the winter. Okay, so you keep this going and look at this big area of dry air. Dew points in the 40s, the 30s, even some areas, some 50s. And this makes it all the way down to the Carolinas, Georgia. And then what I want you to watch is Lee actually helps to rip down drier air because you got this flow around Lee going like this, right? Okay, the winds are going around Lee like this, but Lee's so large that it's going to influence even the upper currents of the atmosphere like this, way over here. So what does that do? That brings down all, even though this isn't a deep penetrating cold front, this yanks down all this dry air further south. So beautiful dry air. moving in. I think that this weekend is going to be very nice, but this will move in well before the weekend. And these low dew points continue for like Georgia. I mean, getting all the way into North Florida potentially. But this is a very, very dry air mass and just a crisp early fall-like air mass over the eastern U.S. And looks like it continues all the way into next week. And then we watch for the return of more moist air for the southeast. Just not for that time of the year where we get consistent cool air. But you can see it in that. This is temperatures. You can see it with temperatures. Look at this. You get into Thursday morning. Look at these low temperatures. You get widespread 40s. You might even get some upper 30s in these higher elevations of Virginia or North Carolina or West Virginia. But look at these low temperatures. You'll be able to put to put your windows up in your house, let your house air out. It's always that time of the year where it's great to do that. But you got temperatures into the 60s, into the Carolinas, Georgia, upper 50s into northern Alabama. And then nice, pleasant temperatures for highs. And then look for our Friday morning. All right, you're getting 50s all the way down to South Carolina, North Georgia. I expect this to be a little bit even cooler than this. But then we get into high temperatures and just 60s and 70s across the eastern U.S. Maybe only gets into the 70s for the Carolinas, low 80s for Tennessee, low humidity, no humidity with this. So basically, no humidity. I said low humidity, no humidity. It's kind of weird, but you get what I'm saying. But just a very nice air mass, even in a Saturday morning. And I just think we got a fantastic stretch of days coming up. And it always seems like we get a nice air mass around the threat of a tropical system or just after. And that's typically because a cold front kicks out tropical systems. So I don't know if you guys remember with Ian last year when it made the second landfall in South Carolina. That was definitely not a tropical kind of landfall. That thing made landfall and it was chilly outside. I chased it. It was wild. Man, thank y'all for everything. It's been a grind pumping out 2 videos a day, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it and enjoying the information. Thank y'all for the growth. I had a appreciation video I dropped earlier this afternoon. I meant it with everything I got. Thank y'all so much for the support. God bless all y'all. Have a great night.